Hello and welcome to Art and Self. I'm Cindy Ingram, your host and the founder of Art Class Curator, the Curated Connections Library, and the Art and Self Connection Circle. This is a podcast where we experience the range and depth of what it means to be human, seen through our connections and conversations about works of art. These art conversations are here to show you that art is here for you as a catalyst, a challenger, a coach, and a comfort. Before we get started, take a moment to fill up your lungs with a deep breath. Connect with your body and your mind and your spirit, and get ready to discover what art has to show you. Hello, this is Cindy, and today I have a different type of episode for you. I will explain it once I get into it, but just to let you know, this was recorded on Facebook as a Facebook Live, and I plan on doing these weekly updates about my 2023 word of the year, which is artist. And each week I will give a little bit of a update, what I'm thinking about, how I'm looking at my work and my life through the term artist, and how that word is impacting me. So this episode is kind of explaining that overall process. And then you will still have your interview episodes where we talk about the works of art. So I will just add these word of the year updates into the rotation. And so there will be 2 new podcasts every week, as long as I keep up with my word of the year updates. And I don't have an interview for you this week because I am, as I will explain in the video, as I'm getting over COVID, and I just had to reschedule all of my interviews because I just didn't feel up to that level of conversation when my energy level is so low and my voice is kind of hard to control and manage and predict how it's going to be. So anyway, without further ado, here is my first word of the year update for 2023. Enjoy. Hello, this is Cindy Ingram, and I am just double checking that my live video is working on Facebook. Yes, it is. I am really happy that I have created a new word of the year, and I do that every year. But the one that I have for this year is sort of extra special for me, extra inspirational, and I am really wanting to stay engaged with my word of the year because in the past I have kind of faltered a little bit on that. And by the end of the year, it's like I've kind of forgotten about it. And so I thought what I would do was come on and do an update every week. And I will also be posting these to the Art and Self podcast. So if you are subscribed to Art and Self with Cindy Ingram, you also can listen to these there. But I'll be posting them on Facebook as well. And so I'm just making sure that it's working. It is. Okay. I got an error, but still managed to be working. So that's good. All right. So my word of the year this year is artist. And I have so much baggage around this word. And I kind of want to share the baggage that I have and how I ended up choosing this as my word. And then some of the reflections that I've already made so far, because I'm starting these updates a little bit late, not with the new year, because I ended up, I was traveling to Universal Studios, and then I ended up with COVID, and then my husband had COVID, and then my children have COVID, and they all still do. I'm still testing positive, and we'll see how far I can get through this without having to take cough breaks, but I think I'm okay. I am, you might hear it in my voice if you're used to hearing me. The more I talk, the more I'll kind of start to sound weird, but I'm going to do it anyway and see how we do. See if I don't get out of breath from talking too, because that is a thing I've been dealing with as well. So anyway, starting late, but better late than never. So the reason I chose artist as my word is when I was a child, I loved making art. I drew all the time. I crafted, I used to, the biggest memory I have is I used to make these little like um, ghosts out of tissue and I would hang them from my ceiling during Halloween. And I would, like the paper chains, and I was just constantly making things. Loved, I didn't have art classes in elementary back then that wasn't very common, but I definitely did not have art class in elementary. Didn't have art class until middle school. I loved my middle school and high school art classes. But somewhere along the way, I discovered art history, which I went to a Europe trip when I was in high school. And I grew up in Amarillo, Texas. We didn't have, the biggest city, closest big city was 5 or 6 hours away. We didn't go to art museums. I didn't ever see art by other people. It wasn't really a part of my art curriculum, looking at art by other people. So once I discovered art by other people, I was totally hooked because I was so emotionally moved by it. And I got that through Disney movies. I watched Lion King 12 times at the movie theater when I was in the 8th grade. I had lived around the corner from a dollar theater. We would just go over and over. Me and my best friend Jeannie, who I went to Universal Studios with, we would constantly be going to the dollar movie. And I would cry every time during Circle of Life. I was so moved by it that I decided I wanted to be a Disney animator, and I would like learn about all the animators, and then discovered art history, discovered like museums, and kind of fell in love with that, and that kind of became my path. And then during my college education, I was getting my art history degree, and I had to take art classes, 4 studio art classes, the 3D one, 3D, 2D, 3D, the drawing one, drawing two. Although I have no memory of taking drawing two. I remember it was required, but I don't remember actually having taken it, which is really interesting. I know I took another studio art class when I was studying study abroad, so maybe that counted as my 4th credit. I don't know. Or I just took it and completely blocked it out. That's completely possible too. I have a terrible memory. So, I learned in high school and I learned in college that I do have, some level of natural ability. I do have an eye for things. I can draw well. I can look at something and draw it. I can do. I have like above average like natural talent for art, right? But there were these people in my classes. I remember one of them very particularly in high school. I won't call his name out, but he is a working artist today, which is really cool. But I haven't Googled him in a long time, so I have to go do that later. But anyway, he was so talented, and I was like, I can never do that. I was like, I can never, like, I can't even imagine a world what I could ever draw like he did and have that sort of natural ability. And he would make these oil paintings that were just incredible, and I felt so less than. I felt like I couldn't do it. And then I went into college and took my drawing class, drawing one, and I loved it. It was like those 4 hours, you go in and then you spend 4 hours just in your world drawing. I was like come out completely covered like a coal miner. I was like covered in charcoal, and it was so fun. And I felt like it was such a like zen peaceful thing to do, was just sit there and draw for that long period of time. And the problem is that I didn't feel like I ever could get better at it. Like I felt like, yes, okay, I have a good eye for proportion. I can do that. Like proportion I've got. But when it came to making like the modeling techniques and the shading, like I never felt like I could get beyond like the level that I thought I should be able to get to. And it was kind of cemented when my drawing teacher, we had our like end of semester review or whatever, and we'd pick our couple best drawings and we'd put them out there, and we were out in the hall, and it would do like a one-on-one critique with us basically. And he told me that I was the hardest working, most committed student in the class. And I was proud of that because I worked really hard. I knew that I wasn't as good. I knew that like there was something that I couldn't figure out. But I was like, yay, he recognizes my effort. But then I got a B, and then I just I didn't get B's. Okay. B's were not something I got. I did like, I did get lower grades than B's eventually, but like at that time in my life, like a B was not a good thing to get because I'm a perfectionist and I have to be the best at everything, right? So this is something that I can't be the best at. So, okay, well, I guess I'm not good enough to be an artist. I realized that I wasn't, there was something about this thought that I had to have the right amount of ideas, or the good ideas. And then I not only had to have a really good idea, really deep meaning for the art, but then I had to be able to implement that idea in an exemplary way. And somewhere my young self missed the message that there's other ways to do that you don't have to have the idea to start, that you can be about the process and you can arrive at the meaning later, and that it's about experimentation and play and taking risk and like all this stuff. Like those art classes that I took were so driven by technique and by being good at drawing, being good at painting, like all of this stuff that like I didn't feel like my version of what art could, being an artist could be, was an acceptable thing um, in the world. And I didn't see it necessarily, I knew it wasn't going to be a career. I knew I wasn't good enough to be like a career artist, but in my head, that's what, like, if you're going to be an artist, that's what you are. And you're not an artist if you're like just painting on the side. So it's not true. And it's a lot of like things, old stories that I made up that aren't true. But they got in my brain and they stuck there, right? And so then I started teaching, I started working in art museums, and then I eventually started teaching. I taught community college art appreciation, and then I moved into like K-12 education. I was teaching art. And even then I felt like, yes, I could come up with a project. I could make a really good example. I could make the great posters for the classrooms. I could, for the pep rally I had to make a state testing inspirational pep rally posters once. I was all good at that. Like it was just one of those like, okay, yes, I have above average good ability. But it just, being an artist was over here, and it was up here, I was down here, and it was never something that I could ever claim as something I am. And even though, like, even in my 20s, I would paint, I created a kind of studio space in my house, and I was painting, and even then, it never felt like I was an artist. It was just kind of like I was painting. It doesn't make, I know it doesn't make sense. But I've learned that then, after working with art teachers since 2014, I've been running, art class curator, and I have learned that I have a lot of judgment of myself when I'm making art around other art teachers. I feel like, oh, I'm not good enough. They're going to see how bad I am. They're going to know, like, there's just all of that gross, like, inner criticism stuff. And so I would avoid, like, I go to conferences, and I would, like, the National Art Education, I'd avoid any art making ones because I was like, no, that's not my place. I'm not gonna go there because they're gonna see how terrible I am at making art. This year I actually signed up for one of the art making ones, so I was kind of excited as part of my thing. So I okay, I'm gonna get myself back on track. Okay, so I would be around art teachers, and then I would feel like not good enough. But I have since learned, since kind of talking about this, that a lot of other art teachers feel the same way. They feel like they are less than. They feel like they are not connected with themselves as artists. There's something about, I think, the closeness of how we are to art and what we see as possible with art. We study these great artists and we learn about them, and we have these deep connections with their art, that it's hard for us to imagine that we too can be artists of that caliber, that are worthy artists, right? So all of this baggage is going in my head that I eventually just kind of stopped making art altogether. I, would do things here and there, but it wasn't something I really did regularly. And I really never had a really full-blown art practice as an adult. In my 20s, like I said, I painted, but it wasn't ever that regular, maybe a few months, at a time. So all this to say, I have dedicated my life to studying art, looking at art, connecting with it, helping other people do that, helping art teachers lead powerful discussions about works of art with their students, coming up with lessons and activities. Really, like, while I couldn't call myself an artist, I know, and I always have known, that I'm a really good art teacher. I'm a really good teacher. And I really like my connection to art, my passion for art is what's special. And like the way that I connect with art is something different. And so, I really leaned into that. And so I'm leaning into that. I start to think about like what would happen if I don't work with teachers. I still work with teachers, but like I branch out and bring my type of looking at art to other people. So I'm exploring this thought. And then it was last December 2021, so about a year ago. I was kind of thinking through. December is a month for me where I feel really like, I don't know, intuitive. Like I feel really creative. Like December is just one of those times where it's just like there's something in the air in December for me. So I think I was in a session with Yola, who, if you listen to the podcast, she was on the podcast in December. So go back and listen to that if you want to learn more about Yola. She's brilliant. I was in a session with Yola, or I was having a conversation with Yola on Voxer, one of the two. And I had this sort of lightning bolt download of a moment that was like, you need to make art. And it was what was not expected. I was very taken aback by it. I was very resistant to the thought that is something I should do. And it was like, no, I can't, no. I can't do that. I can't be an artist. Because of course my initial thought was, oh, you have to make more art. You have to be an artist. You have to make money from art. They're like, eventually it became this like thing where it's like, immediately I have to be an artist that's like showing in museums. Like it was like, it was a very black or white type of thing, which is the thing I constantly am working on in my head, like black or white thinking. So I came down from like freaking out about this idea. I had a random idea for a painting for one of my friends. I made her a painting. It was really exciting. And then I decided, well, that moment of download felt so true. It felt so real and necessary. And the fact that I resisted so much to it, even though it felt so true, I was like, I knew I was onto something here. I knew that there was something in there for me, and that really was like the thing I should do. So I didn't just immediately start making art. Well, I did. I made that one painting for my friend. And then I spent a good 6 months processing like what that means. I didn't actually jump into doing it at all, which is interesting because I'm very much an action. When I get those sort of downloads, like I act fast, but I had a lot of resistance to get through. So I first decided, like I was reading The Artist's Way for a little bit. I didn't get very far into that, but I was reading that. I was kind of imagining myself making art. I was when I would look at art and I go to museums, I would be inspired to make art after. So like there was something happening, and then, but I didn't really have a space in my house. So I was dealing with all that resistance. Like there was a lot to work through emotionally, psychologically, energetically. Like there was a lot going on there. And so I eventually created a new art space. We have a second living room upstairs, and my kids just use it to play Minecraft. Like there's a computer in there. That's the only thing that happens in that room. That they have a computer desk in there. So I was like, well, we need to turn this space into a studio space. Like they can still play Minecraft, but then we're gonna, bring in some art tables and storage and supplies and make this into our creating space for our family. So I did that. It took several months to do that. I finished that in like July, and then I still wasn't making any art in there. I was like, okay, I've got it made. But I was like, well, what kind of art am I even gonna make? I thought I had to do paintings. And then I thought that was the only thing I could do. I was like, well, I just gotta paint. But then I eventually I was like, well, what are my main issues here? And one of them is that I felt like everything had to be good. I felt I have this issue where if I start something, I have to finish it. I had to get through that and figure out how to navigate that. I have to finish it in one sitting. I'm like that. If I'm in the middle of something, like it is really hard to get me to stop it. And writing my book has really helped that process because you can't write a whole book in one sitting. And then, so I ultimately was like, I need to be able to, I also needed to be able to like distract from that. Like, it has to have an idea to start, and it has to be a fleshed out, fully formed idea before you even make it. So there was like all this stuff that I kind of had to work through. And I realized that creating an art journal was the way that I could really explore my process, figure out what my process is, and figure out what my style is, even figure out what I like to make, figure out like, I hadn't made art in probably 15 years, besides in my classroom. Like I never really just made art for me in such a long time that I didn't know what it was going to be like. So I figured an art journal was a really safe way to do that because you could use any supply, you could just, play. Of course, I thought I'd be terrible at it. So I was just going in like thinking, oh yeah, it's just all going to be crap and whatever. So I had to get through all that inner critic stuff. Oh, so much baggage here. So then, this is a very long story to get to the point, but I feel like because I'm going to be doing these weekly updates that I provide some full context. And then, still wasn't making art, but I decided, okay, the type of art I was going to make. So then I had to like, okay, I got to get the supplies for that. So I got like I already had a whole lot of supplies, but then I like got picked out a bunch more based on some like supply lists I found online for art journaling. And then, still wasn't doing it. And so I was launching my art connection circle for the, fall. And I decided, well, we're going to have to force myself to do it. Because one thing I did learn this year, or last year, was that I joined a writing group in April or May, end of April, early May. And we meet every day, every weekday for an hour. And I made a commitment when I joined that I would go every day unless I couldn't, like unless there was just, a dentist appointment that only could be scheduled at that time, something like that. But I made that commitment that I would show up whether I felt like it or not. I would show up. I would schedule around it. I would make that my top priority of every day, that it wouldn't be ever a non-negotiable thing. And so I did. And then what I learned in that process is that every day is different as a writer. Writing and artist are so similar. And you can learn a lot about that in the podcast I did with Heather Doyle Frazier, who runs the writing group that I'm in. And we had a great conversation about this. in that episode. But what I learned is that the brilliance of art and the brilliance of writing isn't just when you feel like it, isn't just when you have those lightning bolt moments where everything is suddenly clear and it makes sense and then you go do it and it's brilliant, that it is a practice and it is a daily it's a commitment to fostering that creativity and fostering that practice. So what I learned when I started writing regularly was that my brain knew I was writing regularly. Like up until I started the writing group, it would be like I'd write here and there. I'd write when I'd feel like it. So my brain never really fully clicked on with what I'm writing and connected with the content, connected with the project as a whole, because I wasn't in it enough on a consistent basis to get my subconscious involved. And so once I started going regularly, so my subconscious was like, oh, okay, this is what we're doing now. This is what we're thinking about. This is what we're toiling with. This is what we're working through. This is what we're navigating right now. And so suddenly, connections were being made that in the rest of my life that were connected. So like, here's an example of what just happened this week. So I am in part 1 writing my book. I finished part 1. I've written a lot of part 3 too. Hold on, my phone's ringing. This might mess up my. Okay. Okay. So I was starting part 2, and I was kind of confused with where part 2 starts and where it ends, and what really was the journey of part 2. Even I know it was like the last 5 years. It's kind of like the time frame, or really the last 5 years minus the last year. That last year's more part 3. But anyway, but I couldn't really grasp it, so I was working on it. I'm making lists. I'm taping up the artworks on my wall. You might have seen that Facebook post. There's all this stuff going on. I'm trying to figure out, I basically was trying to figure out the story, figuring out where my starting point was at part 2 and where I ended up, and then what needs to be talked about in each one. I already had an outline, but like there's something missing. So, I'm going about my life, and then I'm reading a book, and it's not related to anything about this, but I'm reading Remarkably Bright Creatures by something Van Pelt, Shelby, I think. And no spoilers, I haven't finished, but I'm 50% in. But in the book, the main character works at an aquarium, and it was like the first couple chapters, and she was like walking past the shark tank, and then she mentioned something about how sharks never can't stop swimming or they suffocate, basically. And I was like, oh, that's fascinating. I highlighted that. And then I'm like, and then there was a line that says, I understand what it's like to never slow down unless you stop to breathe, or I put the quote in my book, but I don't remember, but you'll stop breathing. And I was like, oh, I relate to that. That makes total sense. Like I have been there where I was constantly working, 24 hours. I'm working 2 jobs. I'm building my business while working full time, while having 2 small kids. I lived that life where I was constantly moving because I was like trying, but if I slowed down, it would be like discomfort. That's when anxiety would creep in. And so if I kept moving, I could keep those negative emotions away. So like I saw that comment, I was like, oh yes, that's really good. And, I was like, I relate to that, but I didn't put it in the book. But then later I was writing the book, and then I was like, oh, the sharks came in. Like I started to think about the sharks, and I was like, oh, great. So I started writing about the sharks, and then put the quote in, and then I'm like, wait a minute, this whole chapter I'm writing, there's no artwork. The artwork that I'm supposed to be including in this chapter isn't fitting anymore. Now that I'm kind of talking, I kind of figured out it was burnout. So then I started to write about burnout. And then I ended up putting the sharks in. And then the sharks, I was like, you know what? I bet if there's a cool shark artwork. And then I looked up, and then I was like, the Jaws poster is perfect for the burnout. And so it was like all these little threads of connection. And then And then I was also listening to a coaching call. I'm in another group called Joyful Marketing, and I was listening to the group coaching call recording, and she was talking all about um, something in education and how, we're taught to look for answers outside of ourselves, which was a whole part of that chapter too. So like that became then put in the book. So it's like the fact that I am currently thinking about working through that problem in my book has heightened my senses in my entire life. Like I'm seeing themes in books. I'm seeing, comments on TV shows. Conversations are bubbling up where I'm like, oh, yes, like that are related. I'm connecting dots that feel so synchronous. It feels so um, magical when really all I know, I mean, I can believe it's magical too, and I do sometimes do believe it's magical, but I also believe that it's my subconscious that's turned on, that's clicked on, and it's looking for the answer, even when I'm not actively writing. And that happens all the time. Like when I was writing, I was talking about my childhood, and I was talking about kind of trying to understand another, like my mom's perspective on something. And then I happened to be at a retreat where there were two women who went through similar situations to my mom. So I got to talk to them about it. I was like, it was just like, like life then starts to like piece itself together. That creative process is really about exposing yourself to new ideas and inspiration and connections. And it's really such an exciting process. And so I saw the magic of that happening when writing my book. I saw how the book was getting more soulful, more connected, and I felt more connected to it through that daily practice, that I knew that I had to make that. I don't know if you heard that. My dog just made a big groan. That's Bruno back there. Do you see him? No, I don't know which way to go. No, you can't see him. He's behind me. Sorry, I got totally distracted. Oh, yeah. So I had to create that environment for my art making, that I knew I had to make it a non-negotiable. I had to make it something I was committed to. And I'm not good with commitment. I'm not good with consistency. I'm saying I'm going to do these every week, but I'm like, oh gosh, am I really going to do that? But it won't be at the same time every week. It might not be every Tuesday. It just happens to be today is Tuesday. Next week it might be Wednesday. So what I did was I was, like I said, I was enrolling for the Art Connection Circle, and I decided I'm going to build this in to the Art Connection Circle. Every Sunday, as part of the circle, we will have an art making co-working session. So I had to be there every Sunday because it was my program. There was going to be people there that were expecting me there. And what we were going to do is just sit and make art together. That's all we had to do. And so I did that, one, because I do think that the people in the program would benefit from it. I do think that art teachers in general, most of the people who I talk to on, this page and on my email list, and most of those people are art teachers. And I know that most of those people are, sorry, I'm like, oh, I've been talking a long time. I'm doing better than I thought I would be doing with the COVID, but then I distracted myself again. So then I was thinking about that cough that I have to do. Oh yeah. So I figured that they would benefit from it too. So it was like for them too, but really it was like, this is going to make me do it. And the same thing that happened with writing practice happened with my art making. Once it became a regular thing, it became something my brain would work on. I would see a catalog with an image in it. I'd be like, oh, I love that image. I want to save that for my art journal. Or I would, like that. There was constantly like the I am actively creating art on a regular basis. And so my brain was actively looking for those connections. And then I started to realize, like, see the connections between my writing and my art making. I started to see the connections with how I look at art versus how I make art, that they're really so similar. I did another Facebook Live about that you can find. I'll try to link to it in the show notes if I remember. Show notes, Facebook Live. I write it on a note card, and I have thousands of these note cards, so we'll see if I see the note card. But anyway, comment if I don't do it. So I started to make these connections, and I started to realize all of the benefits of what it was doing for me. I was starting to realize that if I had a headache when I was at my art table, my headache went away. That if I was feeling anxious that day, and I do have anxiety, and it, kind of comes and goes, it's mostly well maintained or, managed, but like it does creep in. And if I had anxiety that day, I did not feel it when I was making the art. I started to crave it. I started to put it first, like if there was a choice of getting stuff done around the house or going to my art table, I would choose the art table, and things didn't have to be perfect in the house for me to then allow myself to do it. So like all of this stuff is happening because I made that weekly commitment. And then when it ended in December, the Art Connection Circle ended December 15th, and I was like, so many of the members of the group, the ones that came regularly, were noticing those same things for themselves. They were like, this started my week off right. It gave me something for me. It really connected with me with why I am an art teacher to begin with. There's all these beautiful things that were happening just with that commitment. And then also there's the whole being with other people who are doing it too, which is another magical component too. So then like the program ended, and then Christmas happened, and I kind of stopped because I didn't have that commitment. I would go up there every now and then, but not as regularly. And then that's why I created the Creativity Cocoon, because I'm like, I need to force myself to do it. So if I create a program that forces myself to do it, I will do it. And I like, the benefits are amazing. So all of that to say, I started to make art. I started to really enjoy it. I started to really like what I was making and feeling like it was good and it represented me, and I was able to take risks and play and have fun and figure out the way I like to make art is not like what I thought. I don't ever really start with an idea. I just start playing. And that is how I am in all parts of life. Like, I am very spontaneous. I don't follow recipes when I cook. I never make chili the same way twice. And it's just, that's how I am with a lot of things. And so why did I think that art had to be this one rigid way? The things we make up, the things that are implanted in us from our societies and our educations and our upbringings and our patriarchy, white supremacist patriarchal structures, that sort of thing. So when I was pondering what my word of the year is, see how I made it, how long did I make into this video before I start talking about the word of the year? Because I'm a good 36 minutes. They have 36 minutes in here. I thought this would be a good 20, but I think they'll be shorter in the future. But, we're just going to let my full storytelling abilities go, because I can be a little bit wordy when telling a story and give a little bit too much detail, but that's fine. What is too much? Okay, so when I was trying to think of my word of the year, I knew that it had to be something about creating, that I had gone through kind of a period of burnout with kind of business minded things. And then I pulled out of that into more heart-centered, soul-centered connection to the art, and really leaned into that. And that feels so good, and it feels so right, and it feels so meaningful. I moved away from sort of mass marketing to more like intimate connections and fostering those. And that feels really wonderful and juicy and perfect. So I knew that it was that it was continuing on this vein. I knew that I have this book that I'm finishing that will come out this year, and that I needed to create, there was a lot of creative energy. But I also knew that like the journey in the fall making art was just the beginning, and that there's so much more I need to explore about myself, as a creator. And so I was thinking of the word create. I'm like, no, I mean, I've been creating things forever. Like I create lessons, I create businesses, I create whatever programs. I'm creating a lot. It's my natural state, is to be creating. But in December, I finally was like, oh, I'm a writer. Like it just kind of clicked. Like, oh, I didn't realize I've been writing a book for the last 8 months or whatever daily, and like didn't realize I was a writer. And then I saw a post by Simone Soul. She's a marketing person. She's the one I was watching the coaching call of. But she posted a thing. She was like, what if you don't call your business a business? What if you call it a community art project, or she had a list of things. And then I'm like, oh, that was really juicy. That was really fascinating. And then I'm like, well, what if what I'm doing is not a business? What if it's art? What if my entire life is an expression of me as an artist? And that all of it, the books I read, the food I make, the conversations I have, the trips I take, everything. What if all of that is, hold on one sec.
This is a reminder. Pick up the girls from school. This is a reminder. Pick up the girls from school.
That's my daily 3:15 alarm. I don't have to pick up the girls from school because they're here because they have COVID. So we're good. Excuse me, I should have turned that off, but that's too much to remember. What was I saying? I'm gonna get there. Oh, yeah. What if everything is me being an artist? What if I'm an artist already, and that I have, and why can't I call myself that? Even though, like, if I call like a student, I would be like, of course you're an artist. There was someone in the program in the fall who was like, I make kind of outsider art. And she had this baggage about academia, and she was like having a hard time calling herself an artist. And I was like, I could very easily say, of course you're an artist. But like me, no, I'm not. Even though my whole career has been creating things. So it feels really good to think about what my life and my business and my soul and my connections and my family and my relationships, like, what if all of that was through this new lens, and what's possible if I look at everything through that lens? And so that is what I'm going to do in 2023. And I know I know those connections are going to happen. I know, like the story about the shark in the book, and all of that, like that's just an example of what is going to be possible as I continue to think about this. And every week I hope to bring a new theme or an idea or an insight that I'm grappling with, or an observation I've made, and how that can relate to this concept of my word of the year. And I will be back to talk about that. I would love to hear your thoughts on how you relate to the term artist, your insights about anything that I shared today. Do you have a similar experience? Do you not? I'd love to hear about that. If you're interested in committing to a daily or to a regular art making practice, we do have the Creativity Cocoon that I would love to invite you to. We can have these conversations in person twice a week. What a lovely group of people. We just started this week, and they're wonderful. So it was a really delightful experience. artandself.com/cocoon if you're interested in that. But yeah, stay tuned for more about my word of the year. Thank you for listening. If you made it this far into my long rambling story, I appreciate you, and I appreciate that you stuck with me through that long thing. And I'm going to go drink some water and get this cough out that I've been holding in for this long. So thank you very much for watching. I will be back next week. Thank you so much for listening to Art and Self. And if you loved what you heard, please consider leaving me a rating or a review on iTunes. And share this episode with one friend who you know needs to hear what we talked about today. You will find links to the artworks that we discuss over at the show notes at artandself.com. And you can also join my email list to get notified of all of the new upcoming episodes. The videos of these episodes are also available over on YouTube at Art and Self. And you can also follow me on social media, on Instagram at Art and Self and on Facebook at Art and Self Cindy. Thank you so much for listening and have a wonderful week. I'll see you next time.